The health incidents that sickened American diplomats in Cuba last summer were the subject of a Senate hearing Tuesday. Their injuries include severe vision, hearing, and cognitive impairment. Symptoms doctors say are consistent with brain trauma. Republican Senator Marco Rubio, who led Tuesday's hearing, said the Cuban government knows who is behind the attacks.
Really unfair to them. We can say that we don't know how it happened. We can even say we can't know for sure who did it. But two things we know for sure. People were hurt, and the Cuban government knows who did it. They just won't say for some reason. And I think that's the biggest takeaway from this hearing, other than
CBS News radio correspondent Steve Dorsey broke this story in August of last year. He's in our Washington bureau. So let me ask you, Steve, what is the biggest takeaway from Tuesday's hearing in your view?
Well, I think the biggest takeaway is how little the State Department knows after more than a year since these attacks first began. The U.S. says it's confident that Cuba knows not only who was responsible for these attacks, but also how they occurred, perhaps even the technology that was involved in these bizarre attacks, with the vast majority of these 24 American victims saying they heard strange, loud noises, pressure changes in their ears, everything from mild traumatic brain injury to trouble with vision. The Cuban government, for its part, says it had nothing to do with these attacks and, in fact, has spent the last few months trying to discredit U.S. investigators and accuses the U.S. of stonewalling its own investigation. So
if, as Senator Rubio says, Cuba knows who's behind these attacks, why would they be withholding that information, you think?
Well, it's clear that the Cuban government has a lot at stake here. You know, the American tourism industry provides millions of dollars to its regime. It doesn't want to scare them off. The State Department in October issued a travel warning on October the 1st, and since then the State Department says 18 private American citizens have come forward with reports of similar accounts, though the State Department has said it can't independently verify those.
Well, the director of the State Department's Bureau of Medical Services, Dr. Charles Rosenfarb, testified that no cause has been fully ruled out. Are investigators still entertaining the idea that these were sonic attacks, or are there other competing theories now?
Well, there's several theories that investigators are testing, but so far they've been at a dead end with every theory that they've put to the test. Rosenfarb says he's not ruling out, despite an FBI report that suggests that these aren't sonic attacks. He's not ruling out an acoustic element of these attacks, which he says could be used to perhaps mask some other type of technology involved in these mysterious incidents. But he's also investigating, along with other folks involved in probing this, including at the FBI, whether perhaps some kind of intentional viral element could have been involved in this. But Rosenfarb hasn't given any examples of why he thinks that could have been involved.
Well, a total of 24 U.S. diplomats and family members have been treated since December 2016 for symptoms. In 2014, a tourist from South Carolina, Chris Allen, reported equally mysterious symptoms after staying in the same hotel where the diplomats in question may have been targeted. Was there prior knowledge of these illnesses?
Well, it's clear that the State Department says it believes these attacks began in November of 2016. However, they say this investigation is still ongoing, so it's possible they could learn more about exactly when these attacks began, perhaps before November. But remember, under the Obama administration, the U.S. was warming relations with Cuba, so it comes at a strange time.
Well, Secretary of State Rex Tillerson has said he's convening an accountability review board with several investigations already underway, including from the FBI. Is there a sense of the board's scope or a timeline for when this review would be completed?
Well, Elaine, I think this is one of the most important things we've learned from this hearing is that Secretary of State Rex Tillerson will convene what is essentially a high-level probe into these attacks. The State Department says it waited so long to launch this probe because it anticipated that this investigation would learn much more than it already has. It also believed that these attacks were some type of harassment that U.S. diplomats and other international diplomats face on a regular basis in Cuba. Still, Senator Marco Rubio, a Republican from Florida who's been critical of U.S. engagement with Cuba, says the State Department broke the law in waiting too long to launch these probes. We're expecting to learn who is on this board investigating these attacks in the next week.
Steve Dorsey. Steve, thanks very much.
Thank you, Elaine.